Hi, my name is Kevin Kelly. I'm the head of advocacy with NCBI, and over the last few weeks, we've been bringing you a series of interviews with lots of interesting, fun, innovative pieces. So we hope to continue that today, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Dr. Donal Fitzpatrick from DCU. Donal, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Kevin. Morning.
Not too bad. So many of the people who are listening to this piece will be well aware that you're blind yourself. So do you want to tell me a little bit about your background first?
Sure, yeah. So I was born blind and went through the normal school system here that blind people went through back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Went to St. Joseph's as it was, and Rosmini. Finished up there, went on up to DCU and did my undergrad up in DCU, and then became a professional waster to a postgrad and became a lecturer. So my own background is computer science or software development, and what I've been working on for the last wee while is, well, wee while being 20 odd years, looking at how we can make fairly complex visual material accessible. So particularly things like mathematics, diagrams, and all that kind of thing. So my background really is in how you take an interface and actually make it accessible, I guess is the best way to summarize it.
Yes, that sounds really interesting, and I suppose it's maybe an area of research that was sparked by your own kind of struggles through the academic system and the way that maths were taught to blind and vision impaired students, and probably still are to a large degree.
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is that the way blind people can access mathematics has not changed very much since my days as a primary and secondary school student. Like there's still very, very few blind people who can do honors maths because the curriculum is not designed in such a way that is to make it possible for blind people to actually do a lot of the maths. You've got a lot of visual stuff in there. Blind people struggle with things like draw this theorem or prove this theorem, because they can't. We can't put pen to paper and actually draw these things. So when I went through school, for example, I simply wasn't allowed to do honors maths. It's that simple. And then when it came to pass maths, I knew the material, but the extra time in the exams wasn't there to give me the time to actually put the stuff down on paper. So even though I knew the stuff, the grade that I actually got in maths was actually my worst in the whole leaving cert. And I know from talking to other blind people, it's exactly the same. That we have people who again knew the stuff and just couldn't get it onto paper, either because the tech wasn't there, or because they didn't have enough time in exams. And I mean, okay, now we've got things like Braille notes and Polarises and all these kind of gadgets and gizmos that we can all use and enjoy. But the core nub of the thing is that we still haven't really got the access, and we haven't got the curriculum designed to actually help us do the thing that we actually need or want to do.
Yeah, well, you're talking to another blind person here today that really struggled with maths, and particularly getting the concept of cylinders and fractions and all of that stuff really caused me a great deal of trouble. And in my leaving cert, my PATS maths grade was definitely my worst grade. So
Yeah.
a lot of people will be delighted to hear that you're investing some time in your research project to go some way to try to lessen that problem.
Well, I think so. I think we absolutely have to, because the Association for Higher Education Access and Disability, everyone knows them as AHEAD, it publishes stats every single year about the number of people going on to third level, and the kind of stuff that blind people are actually doing. And you can see year on year a very worrying trend downwards in the number of blind people going on to third level and so on. And part of the reason for that is that we can't do the maths, and because you can't do the maths, I mean, let's think about the other number of subjects that actually impacts on. Okay, so some of the sciences, in fact, most of the sciences, let's face it, physics, chemistry, biology, some of the business subjects, some of the other, accountancy, other subjects that actually have maths and stuff in there, and it's becoming more of a problem because then you get into third level and you start to do all kinds of courses and you suddenly realize, oh God, there's graphs in there, there's stats in there, there's all kinds of stuff in there. So this lack of access really, really has a very negative effect on college prospects, career prospects, you name it.
It certainly does. And if you just even, I'm thinking about my own circle of friends who are blind or vision impaired, who have gone through the school and college system. A lot of people opt for arts and avoid those things that are heavily influenced by maths. So this lack of accessibility is really placing barriers on what people can do and achieve, which is really unfair in this day and age.
Oh, totally. And I mean, again, though, I mean, it's even in some of the art subjects, like for example, let's take a traditional subject like geography, okay, which was traditionally one of the arts. It was as far as I can remember when I was looking at colleges, it was certainly taught as part of the arts faculty. Now, if you look at something like geography, so much of it is things like geographic information system, remote sensing, looking at data from different sensors and different stuff all over the world and how that's actually presented. So what we're actually getting is data visualizations of whether it's business, whether it's coronavirus data, whether it's you name it. We're getting these kind of graphs and tables, and we have to be able to look at these things or listen to these things or feel these things, whichever phrase you want to actually use. And if we can't, it really limits what we can actually do in terms of career, really limits it.
And looking at your project specifically, can you tell us about what the nitty gritty of it actually is? And I believe you've developed a prototype.
Sure. So this was a project, and is a project which is nearly finished. It's called the Euromath project, and it is coordinated by my colleagues over in NASK in Poland. So there's NASK, as I say, who are the coordinator. There's Royal Visio in the Netherlands, who are a user organization. They run schools and do a lot of work in education in the Netherlands. And then there's ourselves in DCU. And the basic aim of it was two things, actually. One, we wanted to produce an editor that would enable, or a tool or a platform, call it what you will, that would enable blind people and sighted teachers to communicate mathematics. So we took the notion that a teacher might want to, for example, give their blind child either a worksheet, or they might want to give a document containing some text which might have an explanation and some maths embedded in there. And essentially what we can do is that the teacher can actually write that in their preferred, printed style notation. The blind student will then get that, and they can navigate it using either synthetic speech. It works really well with NVDA, and or Braille. So if you have, for example, a bit of text in there, something along the lines of, okay, you're doing something very simple like fractions, and the teacher starts to explain what the concept of a quarter actually is. And then you have the Braille symbol for a quarter, or the teacher is talking about a quadratic equation, and they explain what a quadratic equation is. And then they actually write the formula, minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. That's going to bring back nightmares for people.
Impressive.
Well, that's the old leaving cert formula. So it's going to be, I can guarantee that if people listen to that having nightmares. So what that can do is you can put your text in there. The person preparing the worksheet can actually write that in standard print notation, and then that gets translated back into Braille. What's really nice about it, though, is that, say, for example, then based on that, they give the blind students some exercises. Solve the following equations using that particular formula. They can solve those equations using Unified English Braille, UEB. Type them in Braille, and that gets translated back then into printed notation for the teacher. So you haven't got this problem that you've had before, where, for example, the blind child has to call it back to the teacher, or the teacher has to learn the Braille notation, for example, or you're waiting on one of the visiting teachers to actually arrive, or the special needs assistant to actually help, or whatever. So that was the first phase of it. And then the second bit was we realized that some teachers might struggle to actually convey concepts. And it's funny because your comment earlier, Kevin, on the cylinder rang bells, because it's actually one of the ones that really causes problem. What's the area or the volume of a cylinder? What is a cylinder? So we put between the three organizations 300 worksheets up there. We've called them worksheets. They're kind of just documents, again, prepared using the Euromath platform, which say, right, this is actually how you teach this concept to a blind child. So there are resources actually available for the teachers, which will help them to convey the concepts. Now, they're very much proof of concept. And the lovely thing about it is that teachers can actually expand it with their own knowledge. There's this collection of useful resources with their own knowledge.
And maybe this has happened already, but is it your hope that teachers will download it and feedback their thoughts on the system, and you'll capture the thoughts and views of students who are blind and vision impaired?
Absolutely. We've already had a trial in actually one of the higher education institutions in Ireland. We had a situation where somebody needed access to a piece of software that would help them with mathematics as part of a course. So we actually made the Euromath application available to them, and they've actually been using it and playing with it. So we've actually got feedback, but we'd be delighted to get more. But just to correct one slight thing, there's no need to download this. It runs in any standard web browser. So basically, you just open a browser, go to a web address, and you can actually do everything inside a fairly standard web browser. And the lovely thing about that, of course, is that all the normal, say, for example, you're using JAWS, or you're using NVDA, or you're using your Braille No Touch, all of the commands that you're used to using in the web browser actually apply. So you don't, there's a bit of a learning curve, I won't lie, but a lot of it is actually the standard things that particularly the blind children who are used to using the tools that they use are familiar with. So there's no download. You do need an internet connection, obviously, but that's one of the nice things about it.
Yeah, that will be a relief for a lot of people listening to this, because often people come up with solutions to various problems, but the solution itself causes other challenges. So you've really thought about that. So where do you go from here? What's your hope for the project?
The hope for the project is that it actually goes on beyond the lifetime of the funding, which expires in June. That it can be taken on, developed further, and we see where it goes. It'd be great to see it actually used in schools, and what would be really lovely is if we could find a way to ensure that it could be embedded successfully into the curriculum here as a helping hand, as an aid for the students who might actually need it, because we do desperately need something.
We most definitely do, and I wish you all the best with those conversations, and please come back to us here in the NCBI if we can be of any assistance on that. Donal, just before we wrap up, Braille is obviously something that's very close to your heart. Do you think we do enough in Ireland to promote Braille, and what are the main benefits, as far as you're concerned, of Braille?
I don't think you can ever do enough to promote Braille, Kevin. I certainly couldn't do my job as an academic without it. To give you two specific instances, I'm currently reading a document that was submitted by a PhD student I'm supervising. I'm going through that, and yes, I'm listening to it, but I'm also reading it in Braille, and I'm picking up spelling errors, and I'm picking up formatting errors, and in font and everything else. But for some of the science subjects, it's and programming, I certainly find it absolutely essential. You can do stuff without it. You really can. I mean, I know people who choose not to use Braille, and that's absolutely fair enough. That's their right. That's what they do. But for me personally, I simply couldn't do the job without it. Um, I love being able to download a technical book on, for example, I'm reading one at the minute about how to develop websites, and I'm reading it in Braille because I can look at the programming code that's actually embedded in the book, and I can read it very, very accurately. What I think we have to do is, I think we have to really embed Braille into blind people's lives at a very, very, very young age, so that it becomes part of their tool set. Okay, so that if, for example, on a day-to-day basis, it might be 6 days out of 7, your average blind person can get on quite happily with the iPhone that speaks, with JAWS, with NVDA, with whatever speech synthesizers on their computer. But on the day when they actually need Braille, that we have that as available to us and as part of our tool set. Again, I'll stress, I simply couldn't do my job without it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, you've really hit on something there, because I would have lost my sight when I was a teenager, and I only learned Braille predominantly for Leaving Cert Maths, and have used it very sparingly since I finished school. But there are occasions where I really regret the decision, where I didn't put enough effort in to learning it, and hopefully someday I'll go back and learn it, because there is aspects of my job where it would be really, really beneficial. So it's really important to stress to people, if they have the opportunity, they really should jump at it to learn it, because it really will serve you well in the long term, no matter what you choose to do.
Oh, I agree with you. I mean, again, I'll stress that. I mean, I could go a week without picking up a Braille display, because the stuff that I need to do, I can do with speech, and that's absolutely fine. But then when I do pick up the Braille display, I could go 3 or 4 days and run it and read Braille every single day. So it's there when I need it. I mean, I'm going to be correcting. I'll give you a great example. So I'm going to be correcting a lot of student projects and exams now over the next couple of days. And we use a programming language called Python, and it's all based on how the code is actually physically laid out, or it's indented from the left-hand margin. So you've bits of it that are 4 spaces in, bits of it that are 8 spaces in. And yes, you can set up your screen reader to give you beeps to indicate, like, so 1 beep is 4 spaces, 2 beeps is 8 spaces, and all that kind of thing. Or you can plonk your Braille display in front of you and just keep your finger, 4 or 8 spaces, and you can really quickly detect how that code was actually laid out. And so the point I would say to people is that there are ways that, if you don't want to use it, that's fine. But it really should be made available to any blind person who wants it. And the other thing I would say is that where it really scores is the fantastic innovation recently that you guys put together, the Bookshare catalog, which is probably one of the best things that I've seen happen to blind people in Ireland in the last number of years. So many of the books are actually available now to download, whether it's for pleasure reading, whether it's for everything else. And it's just really, really nice to turn off the noise, sit and read something in a bit of Braille. You're out in the garden, you're listening to the birds, you're sitting reading a book, and you haven't got the sound of speech in your ears. It's very, very, very nice.
Donal, I've really enjoyed speaking to you this morning, and I'm sure we've a few people will be having the old Leaving Cert Maths dream in the next few days after you quoting various things to us there.
Well, unfortunately, the poor students are actually probably dreaming of doing the Leaving Cert and actually getting it out of the way. And in fact, if there are any people listening who are contemplating the Leaving Cert and worried, I would just say that if I can be of any help, my DCU email address is publicly available. It's just donal.fitzpatrick@dcu.ie. And if I can help in any way, please do reach out and drop me an email. I'd be more than happy to chat and give a hand, because in the COVID pandemic, we're all stuck at home. We've all got stuff to deal with. And it's a very, very tough time, particularly for students and their parents who are facing into Leaving Cert and other school-related issues. So do feel free to reach out, either donal.fitzpatrick@dcu.ie or @fitzpatrickd on Twitter. You'll get me at either of them. And if I can help at all, I'm more than happy to do so.
Well said, Donal, and we leave it on that note. That was me, Kevin Kelly, in conversation with Dr. Donal Fitzpatrick from DCU. Hopefully you enjoyed that interview, and Donal has very kindly given out his details there. If you are facing into the exams and you have any questions or queries, please reach out to him, and you can also log on to ncbi.ie or check out our social media platforms for all the latest news.